We're here because free speech is under attack. We're here because people are being convinced that socialism works. We're here because people are being judged guilty until proven innocent. We are fighting back with facts. This is not a safe zone, so buckle up, Buttercup. This is the raw, naked truth.
Presidential immunity, striking back against pro-Hamas protests, bad economic news, and more. Welcome to the Raw Naked Truth. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin, and here's the news you need to know. The Supreme Court on Thursday indicated that any trial in former President Donald Trump's election interference case is unlikely to take place anytime soon, with justices expressing concerns about whether certain presidential acts should be off limits. Although the court appears likely to reject Trump's expansive claim of absolute immunity, it could remand the case for further proceedings, further delaying the chance of a trial taking place before the election. The justices appeared to accept that some level of immunity is necessary for a president to do their job and is looking at where the line would be drawn. Meanwhile, in the Trump trial in New York, prosecution witnesses appear to sink District Attorney Bragg's case, indicating that Trump had no knowledge of any payoffs and that no illegal acts were committed. Gaza-based militants launched mortar rounds on Wednesday at Israeli forces making preparations for the U.S.-led effort to establish a new maritime aid route for Gaza, according to U.S. officials. No American equipment was damaged as the U.S.-led project, which will establish a pier a few miles offshore as well as a causeway anchored to the beach to expand access to humanitarian aid, is not yet complete, said one of the officials. But the attack came as U.S. military personnel were scheduled to soon begin construction of the pier, which the U.S. hopes will drastically expand the amount of aid that can reach the enclave. The Pentagon has said the project will be operational by the end of the month of early May, and U.S. military ships are standing by to start the work. This is the latest attempt by Palestinian terrorist organizations to prevent humanitarian aid from getting to the Palestinian civilians. Pro-Hamas demonstrations have spread across the country, but steps are being taken to mitigate them. The University of Southern California canceled its main commencement ceremony as universities around the U.S. crack down on intensifying pro-Hamas protests. Vanderbilt University Chancellor Daniel Diermeier said Thursday that while demonstrations on his campus and others around the country are protected as free speech, violence at these rallies is not and should be punished by school authorities. So this has nothing to do with free speech, Diermeier told MSNBC's Morning Joe co-host Micah Brzezinski when asked to weigh in on the violence that has marked some of the ongoing pro-Hamas rallies at college campuses around the country. University of Texas at Austin President Jay Hartzell released a statement Wednesday evening that unequivocally defended his decision to shut down an anti-Israel protest on campus, where more than 30 people were arrested. Our rules matter and they will be enforced, he said in a lengthy statement that recognized that there was a lot of emotion surrounding these events. This has been a challenging day for many, Hartzell wrote in a statement addressed to the UT Austin community. We have witnessed much activity we normally do not experience on our campus, and there is understandably a lot of emotion surrounding these events. New York Police Department leaders attempted to shut down concerns that the liberated zones on college campuses, like Columbia and NYU, could metastasize into the anarchy-ridden autonomous zones seen during the 2020 George Floyd riots. NYPD Deputy Commissioner of Operations Kaz Daughtry said when he worked alongside officers at NYU recently, he witnessed professors joining the student protests and ridiculing New York's finest for their attempts to keep the demonstrations under control. Let's just say if my officers spoke how the professors and the faculty spoke to the officers, If my officers spoke like that, they would get a substantiated CCRB, he said, referring to the city's Civilian Complaint Review Board, through which transgressions by officers can result in loss of vacation, suspension, or termination. The New York Times released a blistering statement calling out President Biden for his unprecedented lack of media access during his first term in office. For anyone who understands the role of the free press in a democracy, it should be troubling that President Biden has so actively and effectively avoided questions from independent journalists during his term, the Times began its statement. The president couples the most important office in our nation, and the press plays a vital role in providing insights into his thinking and worldview, allowing the public to assess his record and hold him to account. Mr. Biden has granted far fewer press conferences and sit-down interviews with independent journalists than virtually all of his predecessors. It is true that the Times has sought an on-the-record interview with Mr. Biden, as it has done with all presidents going back more than a century. If the president chooses not to sit down with the Times because he dislikes our independent coverage, that is his right, and we will continue to cover him fully and fairly either way, it added. President Biden has done softball interviews only and has refused to take hard questions. GDP increased at a 1.6% annualized rate, far below projections of 2.4% and notably down from 3.4% at the end of 2023. While slow growth would typically signal that the Fed could cut rates, another metric complicates matters. Consumer prices, excluding volatile categories, a solid indicator of inflation, shot up to a much higher than anticipated 3.7%. Inflation showed little signs of letting up in March, with a key barometer the Federal Reserve watches closely showing that price pressures remain elevated. The Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, excluding food and energy, increased 2.8% from a year ago in March, the same as in February, the Commerce Department reported on Friday. That was above the 2.7% estimate from Dow Jones Consensus, and indicates that the economy could be facing trouble. Hertz sold about 10,000 electric vehicles during the first quarter as part of its previously announced plan to sell off 20,000 EVs. Hertz said it's been bruised by its fleet of electric vehicles that are unreliable and more costly than their gas-powered counterparts. The rental car company reported a much wider than expected first quarter loss due to the EVs and significantly expanded the plan to sell off the electric vehicles. Given this progress, we increased the EV disposal plan by another 10,000 units, bringing the combined reduction to 30,000 vehicles, which we expect to complete by the end of the year, said Chief Operating Officer Justin Keppy. This is another blow to President Biden's EV mandates. Harvey Weinstein's New York rape conviction was overturned. In a 4-3 decision, the New York Court of Appeals ruled that the disgraced Hollywood producer did not receive a fair trial when he was convicted of felony sex crimes in 2020. The court determined that the judge improperly allowed several accusers who were not part of the charges in the case to testify against him. Weinstein will remain in jail but could be transferred to California, where he was sentenced to 16 years in a separate rape conviction. More than 100 women have accused Weinstein of sexual abuse dating back to the 1970s. That's the Raw Naked Truth. You can catch every episode of The Raw Naked Truth at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech. We'll see you next time.